Hello, BookTube. I have a little mail haul for you here on a very bright but still stubbornly cold day here in Boston. I am predicting, I am confident that warmer weather is on the way. All the predictions are saying so, it's just a matter of waiting it out, that's all. But in the meantime, I think we're done with snow here in Boston. I think we're done with ice here in Boston, which is great. And not to be super tense and wearing every time you set your foot on the ground outside. That would be nice. And the days are going to get longer, which is a yearly thing. It's been happening for all of my 28 years, and yet it never fails to bring joy. The days are going to get longer. There's going to be more sunlight. But in the meantime, I have a little bit of mail, including a New York-centric blast of periodicals, 2 essential periodicals that I have been without from time to time. I'm very glad that I get both of them again now. The first is the New Yorker. We've gone from having a monstrously snowy cover last time to having a climate change cover where polar bears are going to an ice dispenser in order to collect ice from ground that has none. And the main reason that I resubscribed to the New Yorker was for the literary coverage, and that is where I go in every issue. This one had another weirdly personal piece by Ann Patchett. Just recently had a personal piece about a totally different subject that I thought was just fantastic. This one is also fantastic, but just about cleaning house. But it's an Ann Patchett in a register I'm not familiar with, so I very much enjoyed it. But I did come to this one for the book coverage, and I wasn't disappointed. There's one review of a new book about the women who frequented the Barbizon Hotel half a century ago. A book that I really enjoyed, and the review is really good. But there's a review here of Ishiguro's new book, Clara and the Sun, which I thought was labored and strained. I thought it was a classic example, a lot like Don DeLillo's attempt at this sort of thing, or Ian McEwan's attempt at this sort of thing. Just a really good example of a writer just sort of laboriously exploring some realm of technology in order to do their thing, rather than just doing their thing. I don't think that Ishiguro is interested in AI or the ramifications of AI when it's placed in robot bodies. I don't think he's interested in it at all. He's interested in some of the deeper things that were going on in the book. So the book sort of left me cold. But James Wood's review in this issue was incredible. Just amazing. Better than the book, in my opinion. And then we also have the New York Review of Books, which this is a cautionary tale. This latest one is the fiction issue, which is, cause for worry with me, because they're almost certainly going to write about things that I don't care about. They have a full-page color ad for Columbia University Press that has a little blurb for bookishness, which we saw on this channel and which I liked. But it also has one for post-print, Books and Becoming Computational by N. Catherine Hales that I don't have and would like. So I'll have to get on the horn about that. And Fintan O'Toole gives a blisteringly bare-knuckle piece about the folly of the Democrats in the United States trying to make some sort of peaceful common cause with the American Nazi Party. That it's just fundamentally not going to work. That you knew it wasn't going to work when the American Nazi Party was okay and with an armed insurrection to overthrow the United States government, and when they exonerated the president who made that insurrection happen, who incited that insurrection. You know that if your opponents in government are okay with destroying the government and installing a dictatorship, you know that you don't have any means to compromise with them. They want you dead. They want the whole political system destroyed. The sitting president was egging on a crowd to murder his own vice president. And if they had found his own vice president, they would certainly have done that. If they'd found Mitt Romney, my former senator, who very nearly walked right into the arms of the crowd, they would certainly have killed him because he voted to impeach. If they'd found AOC, we'd have been treated to live news footage on endless repeat of her being murdered in the halls of the Capitol. So, when you've got a political party, one of the two political parties that's okay with that sort of, well, yeah, I guess I deplore the violence, but you can tell that they're not going to convict anyone. They're not going to convict the president for it. They're not going to make sure that it doesn't happen again. They're not going to do anything like that. It's fairly obvious from creatures like Matt Gaetz or Madison Cawthorn or Joshua Hawley that their main problem with the Trump insurrection is that it failed. Not that it happened at all. I think it's going to fall on deaf ears. I'm pretty sure Joe Biden doesn't read the New York Review of Books. And then there was a piece by Andrew Martin where he reviews two of the latest productions from Roberto Bolaño. I don't know how he keeps up. I really don't. I don't know how anybody keeps up with Roberto Bolaño. The guy has 2 new books every single year and has for the last 20 years. It's a literary output that would kill most authors. And I shudder to think what will happen when Bolaño finally does die, maybe 20 years from now. Imagine the size of the collected works that will happen if this is what you're doing, if you have 2 new books every single book season. But Andrew Martin writes about these 2 books because if Roberto Bolaño is going to come out with a book, then you're going to have to talk about them. You're going to have to give them attention in the New York Review of Books. Strangely enough, been no interviews with him lately. Maybe he's just too busy. But this one starts off with an opening paragraph that doesn't really want you to read it. The Return, comma, the title of a story collection by Roberto Bolaño, a story collection of Roberto Bolaño's short fiction published in English in 2010, comma, can be read, comma, in light of the author's prolific and variable posthumous output, comma, as an ambiguous parable about losing control of one's selfhood, in parentheses, authorial or otherwise, in death. In case you weren't noticing, that single sentence interrupts itself 3 times. In a tone that hovers between abject horror and bemused disbelief, the narrator describes what happens to both his body and, comma, for lack of a better word, his soul, after his sudden death from a heart attack in a Paris nightclub. That sentence also interrupts itself, and not really sure why, for want of a better word. We all know what the word soul is. You don't have to be religious to use it. It's obviously not anything else, because no thing in the body that isn't the soul would survive the death in a nightclub. So I don't know what's going on with this Andrew Martin person. Maybe in real life, IRL, he's some kind of wicked pissaloser. Could very well be. But anyway, those are both really good issues, both full of great stuff. The New Yorker's more than the New York Review of Books this time around. The New York Review of Books had a lot of great writing, but not about a lot of things that I care about, unlike the last issue, and unlike, I suspect, the next issue. The next issue looks like a barn burner. But then we also have a package. We have a thick, heavy package in one of these flaking asbestos envelopes. It's heavy enough so that I'm thinking that it's a finished copy. And then we'll be done. There's no law that says that a mail haul has to last 1,000,000 years. There's no law that says that. We'll just very gently, we'll very gently lay the package down. I've got flaking asbestos all over me. That isn't good. That isn't good for you. Make sure to put it on a low shelf instead of on the floor, because it's not good for Frida to sniff it up either. Not really sure why we're still using flaking asbestos in 2021, but the book inside was worth it. Oh my, I've actually talked about this book on this channel. This is Sean McMeekin's Stlins War. And I guess we have now preserved the tripartite nature of the reviewer's existence. It once upon a time was that if you were a reviewer who is deep in the weeds, really, really sort of a regular production line of work going, then what you would get would first be unbound galley copies, unbound galley pages that somebody would just stamp together at Kinko's and send them out to you. That's the very first thing, the very first physical thing that you would get. And then you would get the actual review copy, what this thing is. And then later you would get the finished copy. And maybe sometimes there was a 4th incarnation when you get the paperback, but most publishers don't bother with that because they don't need you anymore as a reviewer, and also because they just forget. They figure so few outlets review paperback reprints that what's the point in doing it? I think that's a terrible shame. I think a lot of people buy paperback reprints, and yet that publishing wisdom is correct. Most people don't review them. I'll have to work on that. I'll have to work on maybe a roundup of new paperback trade releases. But now the tripartite nature is that first you get either a NetGalley widget or a watermarked electronic copy first. Then you get the review copy, then you get the finished copy. And I have already read this, but I will gladly read it again. This is, I believe I've talked about this on this channel. This is Sean McMeekin taking on World War II from the Russian angle. An angle that gets a lot of attention in West-oriented histories of the war, but this is the focus here is much greater on the meat grinder. Let's see. Let me read it to you here since we've got a little time. We remember World War II as a struggle between good and evil, with Hitler propelling events and the Allied powers saving the day. But Hitler's armies did not fight in multiple theaters. His empire did not span the Eurasian continent, and he did not inherit the spoils of war. That role belonged to Joseph Stalin. Hitler's genocidal ambition may have unleashed Armageddon, but as celebrated historian Sean McMeekin shows, the conflicts that emerged were the result of Stalin's maneuverings, orchestrated to unleash a war between capitalist powers in Europe and between Japan and Anglo-American forces in the Pacific. Meanwhile, the United States and Britain's self-defeating strategy of supporting Stalin and his armies at all costs allowed the Soviets to conquer most of Eurasia, from Berlin to Beijing, for communism. And this looks at all of that in great detail, and Sean McMeekin's a terrific writer. So, very good. Very glad to have an advanced copy of this. I will be reviewing this thing. And I imagine it's going to get a lot of review coverage elsewhere as well. A lot of it. So I think it's going to get reviewed everywhere. For a history title, I think it's going to get widely reviewed. And there you go. That is the mail. Nice, quick 12-minute video. No harm, no fuss. So I'm going to wrap this up. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.